I had every time I
We're live. We are live, okay? This is Senate Finance starting late. Walking board today. We are going to vote out S-127, and then we're going to do the walkthrough of H-137, which is the insurance products and services. I believe this is a housekeeping bill from EFR. But we have 127 and I think, yeah, that's 46. I had it with me this morning because I guess I left it in health and welfare. We had amended 147 and I don't know if John is here or
No.
Kirby. We made the clarifying language we went over last night, put in the sunset, put in the review, put in the annual report, so we would know what this new experiment in CHIPS was doing, and we struck the these all go to them, and then we struck the tax exemption for accessory dwelling and VHIP housing. And we did one other thing. We struck the new formula for the Wake Robin medical deduction. So Senator Clarkson or Senator Ron Hinsdale are both supposed to be joining us. But I've been told Ted has some new information on how other states deal with extended care facilities, long-term care facilities, which is what Wake Robin is. It right with the grave kind of thing. And Ted, I think you can present that to us. I think we may find out that our tax deduction system is a little different than some other states. I know some states just let you take a percent. Some have a flat number. So come on up and help us understand. And just confirm for the record, right now, these extended care facilities, and there's just one in Vermont, in which you pay a monthly fee, and it includes almost everything. Your rent, that includes the property taxes on the facility, the maintenance, snow plowing, and also, if you need it, it has your ability to move into their extended care or nursing home or assisted living kind of section. The problem is that they have been unable to break out for us what portion of that fee counts is charged to extended care, because not everybody uses it. So the thing it is most similar to is long-term care insurance, which some of us may live long enough to use and some of us may not. And the testimony yesterday was that we have allowed what is the standard amount of the price of a long-term care policy to be deducted. I want to make sure that that's a yes. So they can do that, which is what the rest of us can do if you are lucky enough to be able to afford a long-term care policy. Okay.
So yes, Town Road Joint Fiscal Office, that is all correct. In Vermont, the medical expense deduction starts with your federal medical expense deduction. You subtract out your standard and personal exemptions, and then you essentially subtract the overage of the amount that's above the IRS limits for long-term care premiums.
Right.
And so Vermont is different than how other states treat the medical expense deduction. Very broadly speaking, a lot of states just match it to the federal medical expense deduction, which in terms of the entrance and monthly fees at a continuing care retirement community, those expenses have to be attributable to actual medical expenses. In other states, continuing care communities are likely making that distinction for their residents.
Okay, so it has to, in other states, it has to be before you actually went in to that extended care facility. There was a cost. All right. And I know my mother did that. She had some surgery. She was in one of these facilities in Massachusetts. Was there for a week or so until she was able to go back to her apartment. So that, depending on what the laws in Massachusetts were, would be the kind of thing that was deductible, and that organization could break that out.
As long as it, yes, fit within the confines of the federal deduction, which medical expenses have to exceed 10% of your adjusted gross income.
Okay.
Would like to note that broadly speaking, a source that I saw notes that the IRS rates case by case how, whether the expense structure within that continuing care community, what percentage of it is a medical expense versus not. And that this is quoting from a review in a law journal that historically the IRS and courts have accepted the methods that a continuing care community has used to calculate the individual medical expense percentages. But within statutory law, there's no provision made for any uniform method or system of calculation. Yes. So that's kind of broadly speaking how it works. There are some exceptions. Arizona allows for your full deduction of medical expenses. It doesn't have an AGI floor. Broadly speaking, they don't have that 10%. Wisconsin has a 7.5% floor. So within different states, they're making adjustments to the medical expense deduction at the federal level. But broadly speaking, states
But
that
it
have
is
this,
actual medical expense, not an insurance. It's money you actually pay out, not this isn't. So if I have surgery and I live in one of these facilities, I can deduct what I pay, plus or minus 10%, but I can deduct what I pay for that surgery, but I can't deduct the fees for being able to move into the assisted living or residential care, nursing care.
yes,
Okay.
at the federal level, it would be whatever amount of those entrance and monthly fees are determined and calculated to be a medical expense.
Okay.
Yes.
So if the one facility in Vermont could break out for us, which to date they haven't, what percentage of their fee they see is, I'm sure that it is going into a fund to cover the medical costs. If they could break that out, then that could, some states would allow that to be deducted.
Because it matches what would be allowed federally.
Right.
Yeah,
Okay.
I do not know the mechanics of how Wake Robin allocates costs, etc. But can only comment on how it works federally and how it flows through the states.
I don't believe they have ever done that. I'm sure this committee, they haven't. Because that would have given us a road forward. Okay,
Thanks, Madam Chair. I don't think this information changes the conversation we had yesterday at all. Like, this is just you explaining a couple other states and how they do it. But this bottom line is that what our conversation yesterday is that a few years ago, we made a compromise which exempted the equivalent of the whatever exceeds the long-term care insurance. And I still stand by our decision yesterday to delete section 18 because it's.
Okay, if we have any other questions for Ted, I'm gonna have Senator Hinsdale and or. You're behind me. Just come up and tell us their thoughts on this. And Ted, just to be clear, no other state allows you to deduct your total monthly fee.
Not that I'm aware of. Other states have a deduction for long-term care insurance, but it'd be
Yes.
subject to that.
And we have a
IRS
deduction for long-term care insurance. We allow a deduction that I think is prorated on that fee. I didn't like to think about the check I write for my long-term care insurance. But I can deduct that much. All right.
Madam Chair, for the record, Senator Keisha Hinsdale and Allison Clarkson. If we wanted to simply get into the merits of allowing this exemption for a continuum of care facility where they roll up your long-term care costs into your housing costs, I leave that to Senator Clarkson because I don't want to appear self-serving. Wake Robin is my neighbor, but I think this is a valuable model for the state moving forward. But I will say, given the discussion here and the hope that I know my delegation has to move this conversation forward and do it in a way that's fair, I have a proposal, maybe a substitute amendment for the committee if they so choose, that would means test this tax exemption. So it would set the tax exemption at those who make less than $160,000 of income. I think often, I haven't heard the full discussion here, but often the discussion is, why would we give this to people who are higher income? But a continuum of care facility, a lot of people put every last penny they have into being able to access such a place, stay with their loved one, and be able to afford that arrangement, into perpetuity.
Right.
And when they put those last pennies towards that, with the monthly fee, et cetera, these are often middle income people who are making that financial decision. If they are high, $160,000 pretty much buys you your access to stay there and maybe a little bit left over for some perks. Or to give your grandkids some presents. But, we thought that was a fair amount and it cuts the tax expenditure from 500 to 250,000. So still, I think that shows there's a substantial number of people who try their best to access a continuum of care facility, not as a luxury, but as a major quality of life measure at the end of their lives. And they do not make that much money.
Okay. But it would allow them to deduct things that other people can't deduct. If they can deduct, even if you means test it, and I have neighbors who have done that, but they didn't have family in the area and it was worth it. But that also includes all the other expenses, like snow plowing and somebody to mine my lawn and I don't know if they get one meal a day there. I was the marketing director for Westview Meadows. You've got light housekeeping, you've got recreational activities, you've got transportation, you've got a lot of things that other people pay out of pocket and are not deducted. And it sounds, part of the problem is that the facility it says they are unable, but other places seem to say, okay, we will say 2% of our monthly fee goes to this. Right now, they can deduct what all the rest of us can deduct. But
So, Madam Chair.
I understand that I was here when we did this,
Right.
and we tried to find a solution but we've tried 2 or 3 times. I always seem to have someone that represents them on this committee. And we haven't found something that works, that doesn't give them more of a deduction than every other Vermonter would get.
Can
Which gives you some equity issues.
we clarify that? If this does give them, this doesn't give them a unique benefit because they are at Lake Robin. It gives people who access that continuum of care facility the ability to deduct their long-term care costs.
If all they are doing is deducting their long-term care costs, which they can deduct on their federal tax, then that is one thing. We've allowed them to deduct the standard amount of a long-term care health policy. But unless something's changed, Wake Robin says, we can't tell you what percent, and I'm pretty sure it's a significant amount because I know what it was up here and it wasn't including any kind of, you had the ability to go into assisted living, but no kind of nursing home care. That they can't tell you, yes, we will have 127 for better or for worse. They can't or won't tell us, they won't pick a number. And I don't know why that says this percentage of your monthly fee we see is dedicated to your long-term care costs.
So,
Let me get Rand.
There is a standard that seems to be used, and it may very well be accepted by the IRS, and that is 30%. There's a lot of literature out there about taking 30% of the amount paid to a continuing care community and allocating that as long-term care insurance.
Okay,
So that's widely used.
Just a federal standard.
Yeah,
can
and
the money guys verify that?
Sure, hopefully I can add some clarity. Kirby Keaton Legislative Council. So in Vermont, the deduction for medical expenses is limited because the insurance fees and the recurring monthly payments can be deducted in Vermont, but there's a cap on that. You can't get a deduction for the amount that exceeds the deductibility limits for premiums paid during the taxable year. And I do have those just to put some numbers so you understand on what that means. At the federal level, those limits on premiums are age-based.
Mhm.
It starts at age 40 or less, it's $470. So anything that, so
A year or a month? A
a
year,
month,
for the premiums paid.
Okay.
it's about $5,800 if you're over 71.
yeah,
Monthly premium, or no, monthly.
yeah, okay, that annual?
he's checked.
I started early, but I never paid that. I've always had 3 zeros added.
So anyways, just to clarify, the number I'm talking about is in Vermont what we would allow. Okay,
Okay,
so
We already allow.
for the year,
We already allow.
that we already, that's the amount that we would allow. Because of that qualifying language that says that, what we don't allow is anything that exceeds the deductibility limits, right?
right,
So it would be, my reading of this is per year in that case. So it'd be 470 on the low end. And then per year, which is what is allowed to be taken for those expenses. And then age 71 and over is at the upper end, and that would be 5,880.
Yeah, that's what you said.
Per year.
Yeah, per year.
Okay.
okay,
And that,
and that's present law.
that's correct.
And that changes, that's what I'm giving you is 2024. That changes every year as the IRS
Okay,
adjusts that.
so that's what we're doing now. That's what we do for everybody now. I can't see how I can increase that for one group because of where they choose to
But you
live.
have to have long-term care insurance to be able to use that.
Yeah.
Right, that's the premium.
That's a premium,
That's the
premium
premium,
deduction.
right? and this we're saying is equivalent to long-term care insurance because you might never use it if you live in an extended care facility. You could drop dead at the age of 40.
But you may
and
never
still
use it
living your
in
house.
private life.
That's right.
It's an insurance policy.
I mean, it's an insurance policy and the way it's priced is not, depends on how many people use it and for how much. So that's what they have. If I were the lawyer for the other senior living facilities and we allowed one to deduct all of their costs, I'd be in here saying, wait a second, my folks get to move into residential care. They should be able to deduct their whole monthly premium.
Mistaken, I thought what the problem is that the amount that these individuals are paying is not counting towards that maximum amount.
Yes,
of
it
$5,000.
is.
So in Vermont right now, what they pay at Wake Robin, because it's the only one in the state,
Right.
that payment can apply towards that deduction that you just mentioned, the $5,700.
If I'm understanding you correctly, the number I gave is the amount that could be deducted, but nothing over that in Vermont, the way that it's.
Are they able to
Yeah.
use the amount they're paying Wake Robin to count for that deduction, that expense?
Okay, so I
Understand the question.
don't know if this is a Nolan question, maybe not, but my understanding is we weren't talking about the cost of long-term care insurance premiums. We're talking about the cost of long-term care. And that would be something more like 30% of what they pay for housing.
But they
Going
may
towards long-term
never,
care.
I mean, hopefully, I'm gonna get more than $5,800 a year out of my long-term care insurance.
It would,
And if I actually, I mean, I don't get to deduct the cost of my long-term care until I spend it.
right, so that's the parity we're trying
But
to.
I may never get, rates going around here, I could drop dead from stress tomorrow. And I would never get to use my long-term care insurance, so I would never get to deduct an actual.
Right, but they're prepaying their actual long-term care
That's
cost.
the argument.
I am prepaying my actual long-term care cost in that my insurance is going to cover it. That's, I prepay the return of my house if it burns down. And insurance actuaries work that out. They may never partake in the long-term care, and I'm sure their actuaries have balance or they'd go broke. How many of them will actually go into that nursing facility and receive actual care?
Right, but they prepay that cost
As part of the-
regardless.
Other people prepay that cost in the form of long-term care insurance. And what we have in current law is treating the people at Wake Robin the same as we treat everybody else who has long-term
But
care.
not if they do access long-term care, they prepaid and they're continuing to pay for that.
That's what
Other
regular
people get to
Other-
deduct that cost.
Other states, though, we heard that have similar facilities
Mhm.
do not allow them to deduct their full monthly fee from their taxes. Their monthly fee includes an awful lot more than their long-term care cost. If Wake Robin could break out, this is the percentage of your monthly fee that goes to long-term care, then we could deal with it. But this has been 6 or 7 years and they haven't done that.
I imagine it's different per the circumstances of each person,
But
just like you might
everybody's
take.
paying the same in. So,
I don't think everyone's paying the same.
No, they're not.
no,
Yeah, there's a standard fee to enter all
There
of
is
these
a
facilities and
standard
everybody
fee
pays it. And then you
to,
pay a
depending
different
on if
amount
you've got a
under the size
house
of your
or a
house.
size and your
We're
age.
talking about two entirely different
Yeah,
things here.
Yeah,
we are.
But, you know, on the one hand, you're talking about insurance and
right,
the equivalent of the insurance payment, which is deductible for federal income tax purposes right off.
Right.
And that's people theoretically, if they could calculate the amount, can. That is the limit at age 70 or above. That's $5,800 a year, but that's insurance.
Yes.
right.
Now, what the people at Wake Robin have is two things. They have insurance, and presumably they can deduct that $5,800 the same as everybody
Right.
else. But the beauty of insurance is when you need it because you've got Alzheimer's or something,
Yeah.
the insurance company then pays for everything else.
Right.
That doesn't happen at Wake Robin. The $5,800 that they pay per month to Wake Robin doesn't provide an insurance policy. It only covers that period of time.
It covers their cost of healthcare
If they need it
if
theoretically.
they need it.
So one question I have is, there are three progressions here. Independent living, and I agree with you, Ann.
Yes.
Independent living, you may not need this, but I wonder if we can treat the minute you move into assisted living and then the minute you move into nursing care, if it can be treated differently, because then you are using it.
That if they can break that out, then that's.
Then maybe that's what
deductible.
we also need to be asking for.
Well,
from
we've asked them to break things out in here on more than one occasion. They seem to have a lot of accountants that live there. And lawyers, and they've been down to see us. And we haven't found a way, if they can find a way to divide that up. So that, but I can't. I mean, I don't have people from Westview Meadows, and that's just the one I know, coming in saying, you know,
Is that a continuum of care facility?
Because
no,
we only
that
have
has,
one.
well, it has assisted living and you get first dibs to move into an assisted living apartment. It's not guaranteed, but they do pay a monthly fee. If we do the whole monthly fee, you know, we can't take off the whole monthly fee because it covers a lot more. If they can break out for us what part of that fee or at what point does that fee become totally your cost? Basically, you can deduct it on your federal taxes, and it doesn't sound like they're allowed to deduct their entire fee.
Kirby Keene, Legislative Council. So, there, just for clarity, there is a gap in what federal taxes allows to be deducted and what Vermont's allowing. That's why, you know, that's,
And we've
and
known that.
it's in qualified long-term care services. And the cost of that is that gap essentially, where those are the things that can be deducted at the federal level and which Vermont's excluding here. So the other part of that is what we talked about before about premiums paid. Vermont is allowing the deduction for premiums paid. So it's the same as the federal for that part of it, but just not the qualified long-term care services.
Right.
What are qualified long-term care services?
Oh,
Get to deduct when I go into a nursing home, or is it the prepaying that I may never use?
they are services necessary, diagnostic, preventative, therapeutic, curing, treating, mitigating, rehabilitative services, and maintenance and personal care services, which is defined.
Yeah.
That are required by a chronically ill individual and provided pursuant to a plan of care prescribed by a licensed healthcare
Okay,
practitioner.
so if my husband's at home and he can't do his activities of daily living and he needs a walker and he needs a nurse to come in, that's deductible. That's a medical expense. But if he never needs that, it's not deductible. We are much more limited. How do they do this at the federal level?
Well, I think I'm looking back at TED because I think other states don't try to make every continuum of care
No,
facility set
we
this
are very,
amount.
no,
They set a standard.
we are very different. We have a very limited, and none of this came up when we did the tax code. It was all about charitable deductions. You are allowed to, you get your full federal, and that's the big one. So they get to deduct federal. You get to deduct here after you take out your standard deduction. And one other thing that we allow, personal deduction. Okay, you take those two things out and then you can claim any excess of your charitable.
Are you talking about our move to AGI from taxable income?
Well, we did the AGI before, yes.
Okay.
But we do not allow you. You can deduct the same thing you do in federal, I believe. But only you have to take out your standard deduction and your personal deduction. I think that's right, but we've got two that you have to take out. Anything you pay over and above that is deductible.
Okay, our intent here is try to create parity. Sorry,
Thank
I didn't
you.
mean to-
We're in a Mobius strip right now, and I'm gonna try to take this out. I'm gonna approach this in a slightly more philosophical way, because Wake Robin is in the next Senate district over from me. I have many friends who are on the list to go there when they get to a certain age. It's a highly desirable place. My question is, it's a question and a comment. My comment is, you're choosing to go there. This isn't something that is forced upon you. You're choosing a lovely place to grow old and to age. And I assume people know that this is the arrangement when they sign up. Or are they being duped by, if this is a known mechanism that Wake Robin has, and it is a choice that people are making, I don't understand why we're spending so much time on it.
They're unique. It changed when we changed the tax code. The same way that charitable deductions, and every charity in this state was in this committee. We heard from no one. I actually tried to get a discussion because I had friends who had family in nursing homes with early Alzheimer's and were losing money, a lot of it. So my memory says we treated them the same, but they are not getting the same breath. Nobody is. You used to be able to deduct everything. Now you can only deduct what is left over after you take out your personal deduction and your general exemption. So anything you pay, but it is for medical expenses. Now, what we're having a problem with is it's not fair to everybody else to take out the expenses that you pay that cover, because you're not paying property taxes, you're not paying to put a new roof on the place, you're not paying to repave or plow.
Well, neither
driveway.
are people. So I want to address Senator Felix's question or concern. And the reason why this is housing policy, and the reason, why I started trying to roll this into conversations about senior housing. And, I don't want to put our affordable senior housing folks on the spot, but I talked to them about this before this session because they see this as part of the full spectrum of providing senior housing with extremely limited options in Vermont. I think one of the things we have to grapple with is that Wake Robin would be fairly middle of the pack standard in a lot of other states that have a proliferation of senior housing options. We are losing senior housing options by the minute. We have middle-class facilities that are on the market to be sold to potential hedge funds. And Wake Robin, has continued to scrape by in a market that often has them, not making any kind of major profits. And the people who enter those facilities are largely middle-class folks who, because if we means tested this, they are making, half the people who are paying this are making less than $160,000 a year. This is about senior housing and helping people age in place. Otherwise, it costs more to get them in skilled nursing, and that is deductible for other people who leave assisted living.
Okay. We're not, if Wake Robin could break it out and they have to date refused to do that or said they can't do it. But it doesn't sound like we are out of line with any of the rest of the states any more than we are. Nobody else can deduct more than that. You can take what you do when you're.
I think that's a misunderstanding.
Well, is it a misunderstanding?
So your federal medical expense deduction is the percentage of your entrance and monthly fees that are attributable to actual medical expenses.
Okay,
And so if this amendment were to, well, I know there's a mean testing, but if you were to move closer to the federal deduction, which is what a lot of states do, you would have to figure out the percentage. I imagine that Wake Robin, if we're pressed, they would be able to figure out the percentage. And generally the IRS, the IRS follows what continuing care communities determine is a percentage of their, what percentage of their entrance and monthly fees are.
so right now, they can deduct whatever they're deducting on their federal. Once you subtract out our two standard deductions, okay?
I thought the gap, they cannot.
No, they cannot, and nobody else can.
Other-
Can I
I
So, yeah,
mean, all right,
can I say something?
well, let Kirby, I want to
Okay.
make sure. we're
Yeah,
getting
to
this
make sure
straight.
that's clear, some, like what, I was talking about the qualified long-term care services.
Mhm.
Ted was talking about how the IRS, as far as these entrance fees and monthly
Yeah.
fees, how they play into that. The
Okay.
IRS allows a percentage. That area is something that is allowed at the federal level, that amount,
Okay,
and we are not, Vermont is not.
okay,
That is the difference, in addition to the things that the chair mentioned, like Vermont standard deduction,
Yeah.
personal exemption. And then all other medical expenses other than the things those three things, after they've been taken out, yes. Vermont will follow the federal treatment, but it's not the same.
wait, they can. There's a percentage the IRS has that others that they consider legitimate, because there's an awful lot more of these gated special communities in other places.
There's a
They,
continuum.
there, continuum of care, there are. And if you want to do that, you might talk to the agents, I think it's our healthcare. There was a conscious decision not to do a continuum of care because of the regulations in the state around nursing home care and what it would involve in the cost. So we've got one that once was a life care that has gotten out of it. But what you can do is the feds say there is a percentage of your monthly fees to one of these continuum of care facilities that you can attribute to healthcare.
And there might need to be some clarity around this from what I'm hearing from the conversation. If the individuals who are taking the federal deductions who live at this place, that means, I mean, that logically means that they can show that because the IRS requires to show what those medical expenses are. So that, I mean, although we haven't heard testimony from
Right.
anyone with firsthand experience, just logically, it must be that they can do that if the federal exemptions or the federal deductions being.
Which is why you have an estimate, because that's the amount that they can't deduct at the state level.
Right. They can deduct the same percentage at the state level that they do at the federal level. No.
No.
Why? Well, I need to get this straight first.
Because Vermont has decided that these percentages that are related to the recurring monthly fees and the entrance fees is not something that it wants to include. It's just the premiums, yes, that are paid for those people, that can be deducted. Vermont has decided.
Okay,
but not the other stuff
Okay,
that IRS would allow.
okay. Can we find out what it would cost if we did the federal deduction? Do we know that?
We know the number.
You've
Yeah, that's fine, exactly, yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Let me write this down.
No,
The estimate that's in the fiscal notes, reflects what it would so the $500,000 in foregone revenue reflects what it would cost to follow the federal exemption.
And you have an estimate for a means tested exemption at 160K.
I'm not means testing this, because it's too hard. I mean, you got unearned dividends. I mean, you're only drawing down.
Yeah.
Well, it counts
$1,000.
your income annually that you draw down, but anyway.
Can I please?
Yeah, I'm just trying to get out what the actual law is.
Okay, well, first of all, this is moved because this has been taken out of the bill across the hall. It's not there. I just asked John, who did
Yeah.
the amendment. Appropriations took this out.
Right.
Second of all, we have a very limited amount of revenue in this state, and we are about to get really pounded by the federal government. We do not have the money to give tax breaks to people who live in a facility as nice as Wake Robin. I'm sorry. It is a high-end facility. This is not about housing. This is about a tax break for people who can afford a high-end facility. And what we have in current law was a compromise that we reached a number of years ago. And this doesn't sound like it's fully baked because nobody in this room can fully explain what's going on. And we have 3 analysts here repeating themselves over and over again. This should be a separate bill that is taken care of separately and goes through the process by itself. This is really frustrating. We need to move on. We cannot be giving away tax revenue like this. That's what I have.
We are now a half hour out. I don't think we're gonna solve this at this point. It's too late in the day for action. I think this bill exempts more than any of us are willing to exempt. And I think you can continue to work on it and bring something back to us, or we can do it on another bill. We will have another tax bill, I'm quite sure.
Well, and we have another housing bill coming from the House, and it does
This
strike
is
me.
not housing policy.
Not-
This
Well,
is
for
tax
us, it's part.
policy.
It's certainly economic policy.
Yeah.
For Vermont. So, and I just want to be clear, appropriations has taken out most of our bill on the number of fronts because a tax expenditure is still foregone
Yes.
revenue. It still affects the appropriation for the state. So they took it out as a perfunctory measure like they have others. I'm asking you all to consider a means tested policy. And if it takes longer, that's fine. I just don't want it to be so that it's moot because it's not on appropriations, because that would make a lot of our policy moot.
I
per
think
there.
what we're saying is appropriations takes it out. It's still on the board till they see how much money they've got.
Mhm.
I think we're saying as the tax committee that we don't feel this is good tax policy as it's come to us, which means that our recommendation would be that they not fund it until we find something that is good tax policy, if that's possible.
I just really hope people will take the time to understand it because all we're asking for is parity.
But this sounds like more than parity.
But that is not true. So, I mean, I would be willing to have that argument on the floor, but I'm trying to bring it here because I'm hoping you all will understand that we need more continuum of care facilities in the
Yes,
state.
but you were asking,
We're asking them to be treated like they are in most other states and like most other people.
are you asking for a
Access long-term care.
percentage of their monthly fee that the Internal Revenue allows, I read this as you were asking to have their total monthly fee deductible.
No, ma'am, no, Madam Chair,
Just
what the IRS.
percent or what the IRS allows.
It would be Kirby Keaton Legislative Council. It would be because of the way that things structured, what the IRS allows. And you heard that the cost of that would be about $500,000. for the state.
Okay, it would be what the IRS allows. Over and above our standard deductions. They wouldn't get,
It would
here
still,
you can, if I have the same amount of actual money out of pocket that I spend for medical costs. I can deduct all of that at the federal level. But then in Vermont, I have to take out, it counts against my personal deduction, it counts against my standard deduction. No matter how many other deductions I have, that comes out, I can only deduct
Mhm.
the remainder. If this would allow that,
those things would still be subtracted from your medical expenses taken at the federal level. I think the logic behind that is that at the federal level, you have to itemize. So, this is, since we don't itemize in Vermont, we're still taking the standard deduction into account.
right,
That's why that's taken into account like that. In other states, I would note, we have not done a comprehensive research on this. This kind of just came up in the last day. I know it's come up in the distant past, but I did notice though, some other states, they do itemize, and some of them that treat this differently, it might be related to that partly. But to be clear, yeah, you would deduct the Vermont standard deduction or you would subtract from the amount that can be taken as a deduction, the Vermont standard deduction and the personal exemption.
how much is that a month?
How much is,
How much is this, the average fee a month?
so here's what I'm proposing or saying. I can appreciate that you all may not come to an answer today. I just don't want it to be considered us asking for something other people don't get. We're seeking
Yeah.
parity and we can, I think, I just want to be clear, it's been individuals at Wake Robin who have asked for this, not Wake Robin itself. But
Oh, they've been here.
Wake Robin administration or the individuals.
When we first did this, everybody was here.
Okay, so that's probably a long time, from, because when I remember getting that far. It did make it through the two appropriations last biennium, and then we just truly couldn't find $500,000. And I can appreciate that when we're in the end game of the budget, when we know more about what's happening federally. I'm not discounting that. I let it go last year because there was no way to find $500,000 in an extremely difficult flood impacted budget year. But I would like us to continue the conversation about this being tax policy that creates parity, not that gives something extra.
I think we've gotten some clarity now, which we did not have probably because we've done this at this hour of the day, every day. That this would not allow the full monthly fee to be deducted. This would only allow the same percentage that the federal government allows to be deducted. Okay, that's different. So.
I just wanted to say, if we want these kinds of facilities to proliferate in the state, maybe we should change the policy about itemizing instead of trying to fix it this way. Why can't we itemize if other states do it, right?
I mean, it gets you to the same place.
Right.
The way that this is written is to, it's basically pretending like they are itemizing when it comes to medical expenses. If we didn't have that in our law, it would be like double dipping. You'd be able to take your standard deduction and itemize, which is something you can't do at the federal level.
And what is middle class income? Because I did hear you say that these people are middle class, and I would argue with that.
Oh,
Do we have a number for that?
I like to
I
talk
don't
about
think
the
you can-
senior.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I think you're making assumptions about the people who move into continuing care. My father-in-law, who's a professor at Penn, moved into a continuing care. They had to sell their house in order to afford it. There
Yes,
are tons of middle-class people who are in continuing care facilities. Wake Robin has a reputation for being higher end, but you know, I live across the river from three of these, and they are a whole range.
but
I
none
just,
of
I
the, none
just
of
wanted
the
to know
others
what,
do.
what is the
and
the-
income that's considered middle income?
That's the only one that that qualifies as the state's as continuing care because they provide skilled nursing services. All the rest do assisted living. So they are unique and the cost right now, and I know a lot of these facilities, because I sold them, I know the income of the people that moved into them. They are, a lot of them are outliving their resources, which some of these, if not all of them, are not throwing them out into our homeless population. So there is what it has cost to run such a facility has changed. These are not low income people. There are probably some high income people and some folks that were considered comfortably off 20 years ago.
Madam Chair.
But
So the Economic Development Committee thinks a lot about what is considered middle income. It is a philosophical definition, but there's a lot of science to standardizing what we mean when we talk about middle income. I recommend the Economic Policy Institute's family budget calculator. You can Google that. That you can put in the number of people in your household, adults and children, and get a breakdown of the costs, monthly costs and then annual costs. And it will essentially, it's then essentially calculating what it takes to pay your bills on time each month. In Vermont, in every county in the state, that's about $130,000 to $140,000 of income. That is not for vacation, that's not for gifts, that's not for eating out. We have an extremely scientifically expensive cost of living in Vermont. And so you've heard us talk about AMI and 150% of AMI. That's about $160,000 of income. That's why you see that figure in your
Right.
social
All right,
security.
you've talked a lot in this committee though about the difference between wealth and income too, which is harder to tease out because
Yeah.
the Mickey Mantle baseball
But-
cards.
I think no matter where you live, you should have the ability to deduct what other people deduct. I don't want to get into means testing,
Okay,
all right?
deal.
If in fact the federal law says this is what you can deduct as the percentage of your monthly fee, and if this amendment or this part of the bill says that, then I can live with it. I just want to make sure that's what it says.
It would be the same treatment as the federal level, yes.
Okay. Committed. Thoughts? Do we leave?
I would support leaving it because these people are still paying taxes. And those numbers of what it takes to buy into this is people at the end of their working life and they've saved up a ton of money and they're basically spending their nest egg for this continuum of care.
Yeah.
So they seem wealthy, but it's just, I'm seeing AARP nod their head in the background, it's just hardworking Vermonters that saved up to do this.
So
So
they're drawing down all of their wealth. That's what they
They're having to sell their homes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And their
Well,
dividend.
that's to buy it, and then you have a monthly fee, and sometimes what you thought it was going to take and how long you live. Every older person is looking at that now. You're on a fixed income and you only have so much savings, and every time groceries go up, it limits how long your savings are going to last. And so
Yeah, I'll be fine with this, but I mean, I have to say that, you know, my anecdotal experience with Wake Robin is that, you know, these are not folks who are financially strapped, and they know going into this situation is, this is a choice. It's a choice.
We did change it.
Mhm.
We did change the rules when we redid. And we are trying to be able to find a solution. If it's as simple as doing the federal, I don't know why one of the accountants who have come to see us on their behalf hasn't told us that.
Can I just say one more thing? It's such a false choice that most people have to make in this state if they can't age in place with their significant other. It is sad to me that we only have one continuum of care facility because it prolongs happiness, well-being, and life to be able to see your partner every day, even if they're in a different level of care.
Right.
And if I could add some levity to this, my grandparents, World War II veteran, my grandmother worked at thrifty drugstores as a secretary her whole life. They lived in a facility fairly similar to Wake Robin, but in California. And when I told them that I went to dinner with Governor Cunin and they wouldn't let her have a second bowl of soup at Wake Robin, they could not stop telling their friends at this very mid-range retirement community in California that a governor of our state couldn't get a second bowl of soup. So when we say Wake Robin is like the high end of luxury, we need more Wake Robins. They should not be the only facility in the state that allows people to age in place and get a little bit of light support while they do that.
They are.
And heavy support. And the key is the
The
continuum.
skilled nursing,
Skilled nursing.
they are the only place where you can have a loved one in skilled nursing and
Yes.
live on the same campus.
Yes,
Yes,
and we have many of those
And
across
this
the river.
is such a public good.
right. Somehow they have become uneconomic. And they don't pencil in, to use the word we've been using here. So we might want to look at that.
Essentially, I think we're saying is treat these, a portion of those expenses the same way we treat long-term care insurance for anybody else who buys it. And most people, if you look back 20 years ago, had to be fairly wealthy to buy long-term care insurance. Nobody,
Right, still,
nobody was
but
selling
you
it
still
to
have to
low
be
income
fairly
people.
wealthy to have long-term care insurance.
Okay.
What's our next step?
If we allow this to ride,
Should we amend that amendment?
well, we just have to take out our amendment. But if we allow, I was checking on double dipping. I want to make sure that if we allow a percentage of your monthly fee to be accredited to your long-term care cost, that you are not also being able to take out the $5,800
Yeah,
a
that's
year for long-term care insurance.
If, my understanding is that if you do what was proposed
Yeah,
in S-127 and remove that entire subdivision, you'll be allowing you'll be allowing all of it. Like there wouldn't be any. You would be allowing the insurance premiums to be deducted and the
And-
insurance fees and yes.
but you don't have any long-term care insurance. If we're saying your long-term care insurance is 30% of your monthly fee, then you shouldn't be able to get to the end of the year and say, I get a $5,800 standard deduction for long-term care. That's double dipping.
It would follow the IRS treatment, which accounts for both of those things. And if you want to know more detail, I'd be happy to write something up if you'd
That
like.
would require them to follow the federal rules, which means they need to get Wake Robin to discriminate, or they need to discriminate expenses.
Okay, as long as they, because, all right, so they can do either or. If they can take out the standard 5,800, or they can deduct 30% of their monthly.
I don't know, it's a standard 5,800.
Yeah,
You have to,
what-
indicate what
yeah,
the number
what
is.
you're- yeah,
That's just
but
the
they-
limit.
Spend.
So they
And your age
couldn't
matters.
do that.
Yeah,
then.
and-
They
and
don't
say-
have that bill, then they couldn't do it. Okay,
Actually, but please put my name on the amendment.
Okay.
Happy.
well,
But you're a
well, I need a forum here. Can I have a motion? You've got 5 whole minutes to remove that section of our amendment. We have struck that section. Can I have a motion to amend to put that back in? Kirby, I'm hoping you're going to draft this.
I believe John was the drafter for your amendment.
I'll make that motion.
But I can let John know.
John did this one? Okay.
'Cause
We
It's,
just
it's
need-
the same with the TIFs changes, right? That's why.
Yeah.
John-
Yeah, no, this, okay, we're going to take out our. I need a motion, if that's what we want to do, to just not,
I will move to leave that section in and to
Okay.
not remove it from the bill.
so Senator Chittenden has moved that we leave the section of Wake Robin in. Is there discussion on that?
Well, there's still, has to be something added to that to ensure that the total amount of medical deduction for long-term care insurance does not exceed one or the other.
My
So
understanding,
that they can't do both.
my understanding is that will effectively happen when we synchronize with the federal rules.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think you're getting that, Senator.
Oh, John heard us.
I can double check that. I mean, if that's your concern, then current law gets you there because they can,
I think,
uh,
Okay,
John.
The total amount of that deduction for Vermont income tax. That's what I-
John's not our tax director,
No,
so we're beating up.
you're doing the federal treatment, it's possible that it will exceed just the insurance premium cap. Yeah.
Yeah. You have to show the tax,
Yeah, sure,
right?
tax.
You audited,
The amount. Okay.
and if you took out a percentage of your continuing care plus a long-term care insurance, I think it would. If there's anybody looking at the flags in the IRS, anyone.
But the federal government doesn't allow double dipping, so that's
It
a
does.
definite for it.
Okay. So we have a motion to remove our 0 mark, to leave that in the bill. Is there further discussion? If not, before I lose a quorum, clerk, will you call the roll? You have a paper and I'm gonna need a second paper. Because I'm gonna need to do.
Are we just voting on this one thing?
We're going to do the bill as amended. We're going to vote out the bill as amended. Okay, so this is to
Legally.
remove our removal of section whatever it is,
18.
section 18. Okay. So clerk, call the roll. There's no further discussion.
Can you repeat what it is?
No, I can't. We're voting on the bill as amended, taking out section 18 of our amendment.
We take out section 18 of our amendment.
I don't know if it's section 18 in the amendment, what instance it is, but it's section 18 in the bill.
Of the bill.
Leaving it in as opposed to taking it out.
Leave
it.
From it.
Thank you.
Leave it.
Question, are you
Great.
comfortable that there's no modification of that section is needed?
Oh, wow.
That's perfect.
That's the question. Are we achieving the result? I guess, are we achieving the result that we want and intend if that section remains unamended or unchanged in any way?
The result is parity.
What section are we removing of our amendment?
None, because this amendment does not speak to sections 18 through 21, which are addressed in the appropriations amendment.
Which is what I said.
But we're stating that we don't want to remove that.
What,
section.
from a
but this is not in our amendment,
They've already been removed in the
They've
appropriation.
already removed it approach,
so why are we
but
spending?
approach, isn't it approach removed it the way they remove all
Yes.
money pieces?
Okay, let's,
And the intent is still there with them in putting something back in.
well, they can do it.
They can do it if they know what it is.
Yeah.
And we haven't,
Well-
somehow it would seem to be that we would memorialize what it is we actually want.
If you would like to add it back in,
Yes.
That's what I
we
thought
wanna
they
do.
were
We
doing.
want to add it back in.
Now, if we
Okay.
add it back in as it reads right now, will it accomplish what it is that we want to ensure, for example, there's not double dipping? Which is one of the concerns.
I understand the question, and I can go look into that for you and get you an
Okay.
answer tonight, but probably.
And we
not.
will have time to get that message to
Correct,
appropriations
that's fine.
before the end of the session when they look and see if they've got money to allow any of this. Okay, so,
We're gonna keep our amendment as is because Probst took it out, that section 18. We
okay,
can't then add it back in and then just look at our amendment to take it back.
all
out.
right,
Yeah.
so
Is in your amendment.
let's just vote
Missing amendment.
on our amendment as it was originally. All right, and then,
Maybe on two.
wait, let, call his name, I need a motion to approve.
Motion to approve.
Okay, call his name first.
JJ,
Yes,
you got it.
Goodbye.
we'll be on two.
All right, so we move to approve S 127 as presented to us in draft number 1.1. Dated 3/26 at 7:47 a.m. It's an inhuman hour. So we have Senator Chittenden. Will the clerk call the roll?
Yeah. Senator Beck. Senator Brock.
Yep.
Senator Hardy.
Hold on just a second. I asked our drafting attorney a question about the amendment before we voted on it, but is this just the amendment as our amendment? It
Yes.
doesn't have anything to do with section 18?
We have struck in this amendment, section 18.
No, it's not.
Oh,
struck in
Probst
that
did.
amendment. Probst already did that.
Yeah.
Which I think I said 40.
Does someone have a copy of the amendment?
It's online.
It's not currently in the amendment. I think the confusion is around whether your intent is to have John add 18 from S 127 back in.
But I think that Senator Matos just said, no, that's
It's not in right now. We can enter into the discussion
Okay,
when appropriate, takes it up. And say after, and that will give us more time
okay,
to get the fine details to make sure we're doing it.
okay.
Okay.
That's good clarification for us. So now
Yeah.
John and I know we will not be
Give you
putting section
time.
18 in your amendment. Yeah.
So we know it's not an urgent meeting. So can we continue? We are voting on the amendment as presented, which did not include any of the two tax. It didn't include the tax exemption for AEDs
The entirety of the tax section was pulled out.
was pulled out. So it's on the wall across the way. And we will have time. We can go through this, and if we want to make a recommendation to approach that they take this off the wall, that's up to us. Okay, we can do that. Okay, I don't have anyone that's leaving now, so I don't have to rush. Okay, I think we're going through the wall.
You ready?
you're asking me?
I was on, yeah, I was on, yeah.
Sure, yes.
Senator Goulet.
I'm gonna say yes, pending more clarity on whether this is indeed not double dipping and that it is parity.
It's not in the amendment either way, so it doesn't
Right.
matter.
Okay,
It is
Moot
not in
point.
the amendment. It's been taken out by approach.
then yes.
Senator Matos, yes. Senator Cummings.
Yes,
6-0.
okay.
For the record, I want to say thank you overall for moving the bill, and also, I was able to scan the chip changes, and you obviously are coming to our committee tomorrow morning, but I
No,
appreciate.
not.
Oh,
You've been invited. I thought it was this morning. Then I thought you all were coming here this afternoon. I've got a quorum of your committee in here.
No, they left.
no, they left.
Okay, I will come to your committee
Okay.
tomorrow morning. I need to get a clean copy of this upstairs. I'm assuming this is a clean copy. Okay.
So I'll just say, I appreciate the work you did on the
Okay.
chip section, and we'll hear more about it tomorrow. Thank you.
So you want the recorder? 8:45. Okay, so she won't, yeah, I know. Sorry. And I'll take the. Let's let them.
Are we done?
Would you like me to
Oh, are we done?
explain this?
We just
Put it up.
voted on
I
an
can do that.
amendment that we
People
never walked
just tell you.
through, by the way, just so you all know that.
The email that I sent you all.
No, I mean-
Okay,
Um,
I'm still working my way through.
Are we all